Football players are out in high schools and colleges doing pre-game drills and work with pads. And we're in week 1 of the NFL season. Later this month, the curtain will rise on another season of college football, while millions of people will be tuning to see hard-hitting action on the gridiron. One neurosurgeon says there's something else happening on the field of play, and the powers that be have tried to cover it up.
Playing sports is fun, builds character, and teaches teamwork. But letting children play contact sports can be more dangerous than parents realize. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is a condition discovered by Dr. Bennet Omalu and is caused by head trauma. People with CTE have serious and sometimes life-threatening brain damage, similar to Alzheimer's. The disease is the subject of the movie Concussion, where Dr. Omalu is played by Will Smith. In the book, Truth Doesn't Have a Side, Dr. Omalu shares the true cost of playing contact sports and how to keep your kids safe on the field.
Well, Dr. Bennet Omalu is here with us now, and we welcome him to the 700 Club. Doctor, our brain is inside of a skull cavity. What is it made of, and how does it work? You know?
Thank you so much, Pat. The brain is made up of about 200 billion, with a B, cells. And it's about 60 to 80% water. Yeah. So you have cells floating in a sea of water. In fact, when you open up the human skull, if you're not careful, the brain will flow out literally from it. Mm-hmm. It has the consistency of about jello. Yeah. It's very sensitive. It has no reasonable capacity to heal itself or to regenerate itself. So you're born with a certain number of brain cells. You can only lose your brain cells. You cannot synthesize new brain cells.
Well, now, you came up with a name that was unknown in the medical field, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And what is that?
Well, it was already existing in the medical literature, but that's a descriptive terminology. So I used it because of the Dobbert principle of law, meaning that you cannot use a scientific evidence as evidence in the court of law unless it's already existing, unless it has a precedent. All right. So chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, stands for a type of brain damage you would suffer if you receive a single blow, repeated blows of your head. It's a disease that has no cure, and it's a disease that robs you of your essence, of the God-given life and intelligence you have. It's a very serious disease, especially for our children. It's a disease that turns you into something else.
Well, so a kid that brain is walking around in water, and he's out playing football, and he runs into his opposing player, and their heads come together. What happens to that brain in that little boy?
So when their heads come together, there are multiple fractures or breakages of the fibers, what we call axons of the fibers of the brain cells. The vessels of the brain rupture. There are actually microscopic bleeds. Then the walls of the brain cells become disrupted, and there is anarchy of the proteins in the brain. So a concussion is not a mild type of disease. It's a very serious type of disease. All you need to suffer permanent brain damage is just one concussion.
Come on, just one?
Just one concussion.
Not repeated?
Yes. In fact, there was a paper that came out of Sweden in 2016 where they looked at 1.1 million children and watched them for 41 years. And to become part of that study, you must have suffered at least one concussion that brought you to the hospital. Look at what they found, Pat. That if you suffer at least one concussion, you have a risk of dying before the age of 42. Especially from violent means. I was shocked myself that you have about 2 to 4 times increased risk of committing suicide, about 2 to 4 times increased risk of suffering from a major psychiatric illness, including major depression. you have a much increased risk of becoming a drug addict, becoming addicted to
just
opioids.
From one concussion? One?
Yes, because remember, when you play football, for one documented concussion, you have suffered at least hundreds of blows to your head, the so-called subconcussions. So this is a major, major, major disease that is robbing us of our God-given talents in our children.
Now, you were the medical examiner in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, and you got some brains. One, a guy named Mike Webster, who was a pro football player. And how do you slice them? Are they real thin slices of the brain?
Yes. Before you can examine the brain, you need to preserve it in a chemical we call formalin.
Okay.
For at least 2 weeks.
All right.
To make it firm. So you now take it, we actually call it bread loafing. You cut it like you will cut the slices of bread.
All right. Okay. And then you were looking at this Mike Webster, one of those things, and what did you find? You weren't aware of this before.
Yes, by then, all I knew about was the so-called dementia pugilistica, the dementia of boxers.
Yeah.
There was no dementia footballistica. In fact, there was no CTE, really. So when I saw, I actually took the brain home because my office did not let me examine it. And I saw changes microscopically in his brain. I showed it to the other doctors. It was a disease that in a way resembled what we saw in boxers. So the light that Mike Webster gave us was this type of disease does not only occur in boxers. It occurs in every high-impact, high-contact sport. Yeah. That is why my position has been that no child under the age of 18 in America today should play any of the high-impact, high-contact sports. Football, ice hockey, mixed martial arts, rugby, wrestling, and boxing. Children should play the non-contact sports like swimming, track and field, volleyball, basketball, badminton, table tennis, lawn tennis. The non-contact sports will still give your child whatever football would give your child, and even more. The non-contact sports will preserve your child's intelligence.
When you brought your findings out, though, the football, I mean, you're looking up against the NFL, which is a gigantic, multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and they went after you tooth and nail. What'd they do to you?
Well, they came after me pretty much to exterminate me, not just the NFL, even my fellow doctors. But, Pat, as a Christian, Colossians chapter 1, Ephesians chapter 2, and Ephesians chapter 6 tell us that God is preeminent in all things. Yeah. All things were made in him, through him, for him, and by him. And that he is above every principality, every power, every rule of this present age. Right. So if I profess Jesus as my Lord and Savior, whom shall I fear? I should know no fear as long as I'm embedded in the truth.
All right. Better than the NFL.
Oh, God is above the NFL.
Well, what did they do to you, though?
They accused me of being a criminal, of being a fraud, that my paper should be retracted. They insinuated that I was practicing African voodoo medicine. Their doctors, many of the doctors, including the doctors who are now working on CTE today, marginalized me, ostracized me, called me all types of names, and gave me all types of labels.
They had a whole committee that brought forth a paper showing that there was no damage to the head of people who played football.
Yes, their doctors came out with papers stating that football was safe, and that if you suffer a concussion in a field of football, that you should be put back to play, that concussions were not harmful. That what Omalu was saying, Omalu was totally wrong. But when we come down as Christians, let's just come down to the basic, fundamental common sense. When you conceive a child, God invites you in to partake in the creation of life and gives you a gift of his spirit, a gift of life. By the parable of the master and his servants and the talents, we have to do all we can within our means to protect that gift. My middle name is Ifa Kando. Life is the greatest gift of all. All right. So when we have that gift of our child or our children in us, why would we then intentionally send out a child to a field to sustain brain damage?
I'm speechless. You know, Tom Brady says he's had concussions. Boomer Esiason just said he thinks he may have CTE, and he's a commentator. How many pro football players would you say have this condition?
100% of every professional football player, all of them must have had a certain type of brain damage to a certain degree, with or without CTE. That is the scientific fact. Hippocrates, 400 years before Christ was born, gave it the name commotio cerebri. So we've had thousands of years of scientific evidence. This is not about football. This is not about sports. Every human activity whereby the human head is exposed to repeated blows has a 100% risk exposure to brain damage. And that is why I tell parents who have the habit of smacking their children on the head to admonish them, they need to stop that.
Yes.
Or spouses who have the habit, for whatever reason, of smacking their spouses or hitting their heads, we need to stop all that. There is no safe blow to the human head.
Well, would you tell parents then not to allow their children to play football?
Yes.
You would?
Yes, I wouldn't let my son play as a Christian and as a scientist. Do unto others what you want to be done unto yourself. If I wouldn't let my son play, it would be unchristian for me to tell another man or woman to let his or her son or daughter play. When your child plays, these games rob your child of his or her intelligence.
It's horrible. You made a statement. You thought O.J. Simpson had CTE, right?
Yeah, well, as a doctor, I can't comment on the individual patient. However, O.J. Simpson, as a member of a cohort, as a retired football player who played for so many years, I would guarantee you there's a 100% probability that O.J. Simpson had suffered some degree of brain damage with or without CTE. I've looked at over 12,000 brains, majority of them brains with trauma. I'm a forensic pathologist.
Okay.
And I've reconfirmed and reaffirmed this scientific fact. Like my book says, truth doesn't have a side. There is only one truth. Truth doesn't have a perspective or prospective. And that one truth is God.
Yes. Well, brother, I'm telling you, your book is powerful. And ladies and gentlemen, our time's run out, but you've heard it. And I tell you, you know that song, Mama, Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys? Well, Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be football players. And I played football, and I boxed heavyweight when I was a kid growing up. And thank the Lord, I'm 87. I hope my brain still works. But I was out there doing it. Anyhow, it's called Truth Doesn't Have a Side. A wonderful doctor and a tremendous fighter, and I thank God for him. Dr. Omalu, thank you for being here. God bless you.
Sir. God bless you.